The rope burned through Sarah's palms as the wagon tilted over the cliff edge. Her daughter's scream cut through the desert wind. 20 feet below the river that should have been their salvation churned with spring flood. Sarah's boots scraped against loose shale. The wagon's weight dragged her forward inch by terrible inch. Behind her 8-year-old Emma clutched the canvas cover, her knuckles white with terror. The oxen bellowed as they felt the ground give way beneath their hooves. "Mama!" Emma's voice cracked with panic. Sarah's mind raced through impossible mathematics. The rope wouldn't hold both their weights. The wagon was already lost. She had perhaps 10 seconds to choose between saving her daughter or dying with her. "Emma, listen to me." Sarah's voice stayed steady despite the fire in her hands. "When I say jump, you jump toward the rocks, not the water. The rocks. I can't leave you." The rope fibers snapped one by one. Sarah could hear them popping like rifle shots. "You can and you will." Sarah met her daughter's eyes through the gathering dust. "Jump, now." Emma leaped toward the rocky ledge just as the rope gave way completely. The wagon plummeted into the churning water below, taking Sarah with it. The sound of splintering wood echoed off the canyon walls like breaking bones. Emma landed hard on the narrow shelf of stone, her shoulder striking rock. Pain flared through her arm, but she was alive. Below the river had swallowed both wagon and mother without a trace. She pressed herself against the cliff, face trembling. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, broken only by the silver thread of the river far below. No towns, no roads, no people. Just Emma in the vast, indifferent sky. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermals with lazy patience. Waiting. Emma's water canteen had been in the wagon. Her food, her blanket, her father's rifle. Everything except the clothes on her back now lay scattered in the muddy current or sinking toward the riverbed. The sun climbed higher already, fierce despite the early hour. By noon, the rocks would be too hot to touch. By evening, the temperature would plummet below freezing. Emma had perhaps 8 hours before exposure began to kill her. She began climbing down the cliff face, her small fingers finding holds in the weathered stone. Each movement sent fresh pain through her injured shoulder, but she forced herself to continue. The alternative was dying on that ledge. Halfway down, her foot slipped. She slid 5 feet before catching herself on a stunted juniper bush. The impact drove thorns deep into her palms, but the pain felt almost welcome. Pain meant she was still alive. When Emma finally reached the riverbank, she found pieces of the wagon scattered along the muddy shore like broken teeth. A wheel hub here, a plank there, fragments of canvas caught on the rocks. But no sign of her mother. Emma searched the water's edge until her legs shook with exhaustion. She called out until her voice gave out entirely. The river answered with nothing but its own relentless murmur. As the sun reached its zenith, Emma spotted movement on the opposite bank. A figure on horseback watching her with the stillness of a predator. Too far to make out details, but something about the rider's posture made her skin crawl. The figure raised one arm in what might have been a greeting or a threat, then wheeled their horse around and disappeared into the heat shimmer. Emma was alone again, but now she knew someone else was out there. Whether that was salvation or damnation remained to be seen. She began walking downstream, following the river toward whatever lay ahead. Her shadow stretched long and thin beside her, the only companion she had left in the world. Behind her, circling vultures began their patient descent toward the scattered remains of everything she had called home. Emma refused to believe her mother was dead. Every piece of debris she found along the riverbank might hide Sarah's body, but might also prove she had survived. Emma clung to that possibility like a drowning person clings to driftwood. The sun hammered down without mercy. Emma's lips cracked. Her tongue felt thick and useless in her mouth. She stumbled over river stones, her injured shoulder throbbing with each step. That's when she heard the whistle. Not birdsong, human, 3 short notes repeated twice. A signal. Emma froze, scanning the opposite bank. Nothing moved among the cottonwoods. But the whistle came again, closer now, from her side of the river. "Hello," her voice came out as a croak. A woman emerged from behind a boulder, moving with the fluid grace of someone who belonged in this harsh country. She was young, maybe 20, with sun-darkened skin and black hair braided with strips of leather. Her clothes were a mixture of Apache buckskin and settler fabric, patched and practical. "You're the girl from the wagon," the woman said. Her English carried a slight accent. "I saw it go over." Emma's heart leaped. "Did you see my mother? Did she get out?" The woman's expression remained neutral. River took everything, but rivers sometimes give things back downstream. "I'm Maria Santos," the woman continued. My people used to call this place home before the soldiers came. Now I live between worlds like that river between banks. Emma studied Maria's face looking for deception, finding none. I'm Emma Crawford. Will you help me find her? Help comes with a price out here. What can you offer? Emma's pockets were empty except for a small silver locket her grandmother had given her. She pulled it out, the chain catching sunlight. Maria's eyes fixed on the jewelry with obvious interest. That'll buy you one day of searching, Maria said. After that, we see what else you have. They walked downstream together, Maria pointing out signs Emma would have missed. A piece of blue fabric caught on a branch. Fresh scratches in the bark where something heavy had passed. Boot prints in the soft mud, already filling with seeping water. Your mother wore brown boots, Maria asked, crouching beside the clearest print. Yes, with brass buckles. Maria's face clouded. The print showed no buckles, just smooth leather and a distinctive crack across the heel that Emma didn't recognize. Someone else survived the wreck, Maria said quietly. Someone who's been following the same trail we are. The temperature dropped as evening approached. Maria built a small fire in the shelter of an overhang, feeding it with driftwood and dry grass. The flames cast dancing shadows on the rock walls. Emma huddled close to the warmth, her stomach cramping with hunger. Maria produced jerky from her pack and shared it without comment. The meat was tough and salty, but it quieted the worst of the gnawing pain. Tell me about your mother, Maria said as they ate. Emma found herself talking about Sarah's laugh, the way she sang while doing chores, how she'd held Emma during thunderstorms. The memories poured out like water through a broken dam. She sounds strong, Maria observed. Strong enough to survive a river, maybe. But as Emma spoke, Maria's expression grew troubled. She kept glancing toward the water, as if expecting something to emerge from its depths. What is it? Emma asked. Maria hesitated. The rider I saw watching you today, I know him. His name is Joaquin Morales, and he's not someone you want to meet. Is he looking for survivors? He's looking for profit. Joaquin makes his living picking clean the bones of other people's tragedies. The fire popped, sending sparks spiraling into the darkness. Maria poked at the coals with a stick, her movements precise and careful. If your mother survived, and if Joaquin found her first. Maria let the sentence hang unfinished. Emma's blood turned cold. What would he do? Sell her. Apache raids have created a market for captives. Mexican ranchers pay good money for women who can work. The revelation hit Emma like a physical blow. Her mother might be alive but trapped, sold like livestock to men who would work her to death in the desert sun. We have to find her, Emma said, her voice fierce with determination. Maria studied her for a long moment. Finding her is one thing, getting her back is another. Joaquin doesn't give up his prizes easily. Then we take her. You're 8 years old and hurt. I'm one woman with a knife. He's a grown man with guns and friends. Emma pulled the locket from around her neck and held it out. This is worth more than you thought, isn't it? Maria's eyes widened slightly as she examined the piece more closely. The silver was fine, the engraving intricate. This wasn't a settler's trinket. This was wealth. My grandmother was from a wealthy family in Boston, Emma said, before she married my grandfather and came west. This locket is worth enough to buy a small ranch. Maria closed her fingers around the jewelry, or enough to hire men with guns. Thunder rumbled in the distance. The first drops of rain began to fall hissing as they hit the fire. Within minutes, the gentle sprinkle became a downpour that sent them scrambling deeper under the overhang. But the rain also brought opportunity. It would wash away their tracks, make them harder to follow. And it would drive Joaquin and any captives to shelter, slowing his progress. The storm changes things, Maria said, watching water cascade off the rock above. If we move now in the dark, we might catch him off guard. Emma nodded, her jaw set with grim determination. She had lost everything except her mother. She would not lose her too. They gathered their meager supplies and stepped out into the driving rain, two figures against the storm, following a trail that led deeper into the unforgiving heart of the desert. The storm turned the desert into a maze of flash floods and treacherous mud. Emma and Maria picked their way through arroyos that had become rushing torrents, following boot prints that appeared and vanished in the shifting landscape. Dawn brought clearing skies and a discovery that made Emma's blood run cold. There, Maria pointed to a sheltered grove where the remains of a campfire still smoldered. 3 horses, 2 riders, 1 led animal. Emma rushed toward the camp, hope and terror warring in her chest. Scattered around the cold ashes were signs of a struggle. A torn piece of cloth that matched her mother's dress. Rope burns on a tree trunk where someone had been tied. But also something else, something that made Maria curse in Spanish. What is it? Emma asked, though part of her already knew. Maria held up a leather glove, expensive and well-made. This belongs to Captain Harrison from Fort Stevens. I'd know it anywhere. The pieces fell into place in Emma's mind like stones dropping into still water. Joaquin works for the soldiers. Worse, the soldiers work for him. Harrison's been selling Apache captives to Mexican ranchers for years. The army looks the other way because Joaquin shares the profits. Emma felt the world shift beneath her feet. The people who were supposed to protect settlers were the ones enslaving them. The law itself was corrupt. My mother's alive, she said with fierce certainty. They wouldn't have tied her up if they were going to kill her. Alive, yes, but for how long? Maria's expression was grim. They're heading for the border. Once they cross into Mexico, she disappears forever. They followed the trail through increasingly rough country. Rocky canyons gave way to open desert where the sun beat down without mercy. Emma's water ran low despite Maria's careful rationing. Her lips cracked and bled. But she pressed on, driven by the image of her mother bound and helpless somewhere ahead. It was midday when they spotted the dust cloud on the horizon. 3 riders moving at a steady pace toward the distant mountains. Too far to make out details, but Emma's heart clenched with certainty. There, she breathed. Maria pulled out a small brass telescope, studying the distant figures. Her face darkened as she focused the lens. It's them. Joaquin Harrison and... She paused, then lowered the telescope with a strange expression. What? Emma demanded. The 3rd rider isn't tied up. She's riding her own horse, wearing a hat, sitting straight in the saddle. Emma grabbed the telescope, her hands shaking as she tried to focus it. The figures wavered in the heat shimmer, but gradually became clear. Her mother, alive, unbound, apparently unharmed. And she was laughing at something Captain Harrison had said. Emma's world tilted sideways. The telescope slipped from nerveless fingers, hitting the ground with a metallic ring. No, she whispered. No, that's not possible. But the evidence was undeniable. Sarah Crawford wasn't a captive. She was a willing participant. Maria's voice was gentle but implacable. Your mother knew Joaquin before the wagon went over the cliff. This wasn't an accident, Emma. It was planned. The words hit like physical blows. Emma sank to her knees in the red dirt, her mind reeling. Everything she had believed about her family, her life, her mother's love, was built on lies. But why? The question came out as a sob. Maria knelt beside her, placing a comforting hand on Emma's shoulder. Some people will do anything for money. Your grandmother's locket, your father's land deed, whatever valuables were in that wagon. Maybe your mother thought you died in the river and decided to save herself. Or maybe she had never cared about Emma at all. Thunder rumbled again, though the sky remained clear. Emma looked up confused, then realized the sound was coming from the ground. Hoofbeats, multiple horses approaching fast. Apache war party, Maria hissed, grabbing Emma's arm. We need to move. Now. But they were caught in the open with nowhere to hide. The riders crested the ridge like avenging angels, war paint gleaming on bronze skin weapons raised against the blazing sun. At their head rode a young warrior whose eyes burned with familiar fury. He looked directly at Maria and spoke in rapid Apache, his voice carrying across the desert like a whip crack. Maria's face went pale. She responded in the same language, her tone placating but firm. What's he saying? Emma demanded. His name is Naalnish. He's my brother. Maria's voice was thick with emotions Emma couldn't identify. And he's come to take me home. The warrior's gaze shifted to Emma, studying her with the intensity of a hawk examining prey. When he spoke again, his English was heavily accented, but clear. White child walks Apache land without permission. This is death. Emma found courage she didn't know she possessed. My mother is being taken to Mexico as a slave. I'm trying to save her. Nalnish's expression didn't change. Your people enslave mine. Why should Apache children matter more than Apache children? They shouldn't, Emma replied simply. All children should be protected. For the first time, something shifted in the warrior's eyes. He looked at his sister, then back at Emma, weighing something in his mind. Maria spoke rapidly in Apache, gesturing toward the distant dust cloud, where Emma's mother traveled with her captors. Naalnish listened, his expression growing darker with each word. Finally, he nodded once and turned back to Emma. Your mother rides with soldiers who kill Apache women and children. These men are our enemies. Then help me stop them, Emma said. Naalnish smiled, and it was sharp as a blade in the desert sun. The Apache war party moved like shadows across the desert, Emma clinging to Maria's horse as they closed the distance to their quarry. Nealnish had deployed his warriors in a wide arc, cutting off all escape routes to the Mexican border. But as they drew closer to their targets, Emma's resolve began to crumble. Through the telescope, she could see her mother more clearly now. Sarah was animated, gesturing as she spoke with Captain Harrison. She wore a new dress, clean and well-fitted. Her hair was brushed and pinned. She looked like a woman enjoying herself, not someone fleeing for her life. "I don't understand," Emma whispered to Maria. "If she planned this, why did she tell me to jump? Why didn't she just let me die with the wagon?" Maria's face was troubled. "Maybe she didn't plan for you to survive. Maybe seeing you alive changes everything." They had their answer soon enough. Nealnish's warriors attacked with perfect coordination, erupting from hidden positions among the rocks like desert spirits given flesh. Joaquin's horse went down immediately, spilling the bandit into the dust with a broken leg. Captain Harrison drew his saber, but found himself surrounded by lance points before he could strike a blow. Only Sarah remained mounted, her face pale with shock, as she found herself at the center of an Apache war party. "Emma," she called out, her voice breaking with disbelief. "Emma, is that you?" Emma slid down from Maria's horse and walked slowly toward her mother. The desert fell silent except for the sound of horses breathing hard and leather creaking. "Hello, Mama," Emma said quietly. Sarah's face crumpled. She dismounted with shaking legs and reached toward her daughter, but Emma stepped back. "Don't," Emma said. "Don't touch me." "Baby, you don't understand. I thought you were dead. When the wagon went over, I searched the water for hours. I only went with these men because they offered you money," Emma interrupted. "Because you saw a chance to get rich and you took it." Sarah's mouth worked soundlessly for a moment. Then her shoulders sagged in defeat. "Yes," she whispered. "God forgive me, yes." Captain Harrison struggled against the warriors holding him, his face red with rage. "You stupid woman, you've doomed us all. These savages will torture us for days before they let us die." Nealnish walked over and struck Harrison across the face with casual violence. The soldier's head snapped back, blood flowing from his nose. "Speak again and I cut out your tongue," the Apache warrior said calmly. Emma looked between her mother and the man who had been buying and selling human lives. Both had betrayed everything she thought was sacred. Both deserved whatever justice Nealnish chose to deliver. But Emma also remembered her father's voice speaking of mercy and forgiveness in their tiny cabin during winter storms. "Let them go," she said suddenly. Every eye turned to her. Nealnish frowned, clearly not understanding. "Your mother betrayed you," Maria pointed out gently. "These men have killed Apache women and children." "I know, but killing them won't bring those children back. It will just make more orphans." Nealnish studied Emma for a long moment. "You speak wise words for such a small person, but justice must be served." "Then serve it. Take their horses, their weapons, their water. Let them walk home through the desert they've poisoned with their greed. If they survive, maybe they'll learn something. If they don't—" Emma shrugged. "The desert will judge them." Sarah stared at her daughter with amazement and growing horror. "Emma, you can't leave me out here to die. I'm your mother." "A mother protects her children," Emma replied. "A mother doesn't sell them for gold. A mother doesn't lie to them about who's coming to rescue them." The truth of it hung in the air like heat shimmer. Sarah had forfeited any claim to motherhood when she chose greed over love. But as Emma watched her mother standing alone in the vast desert, she felt something crack inside her chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but something softer than rage. "However," Emma continued, "if you can walk to the nearest town without help, if you can survive what you've put others through, then maybe you'll have earned the right to call yourself my mother again." She pulled her grandmother's locket from her neck and held it out to Nealnish. "This will buy safe passage for an Apache child to anywhere they want to go. Maybe somewhere they can grow up without soldiers hunting them." Nealnish took the locket reverently. "You would give this for Apache child you have never met. All children should be protected," Emma repeated, "even from their own mothers when necessary." The war party stripped the three adults of everything valuable, leaving them with only the clothes on their backs and a single canteen of water between them. No horses, no weapons, no way to navigate except by the stars. As the Apache warriors prepared to leave, Maria knelt beside Emma. "You can come with us," she offered. "My people will accept you. You've shown wisdom and courage today." Emma looked toward the distant mountains where her old life had ended and her new one waited to begin. Then she looked at the three figures already stumbling away across the burning sand. "No," she said finally, "but thank you. I need to see where this path leads first." Maria nodded, understanding. "Then may your path be straight and your water never run dry. She pressed a small pouch into Emma's hands. Jerky and silver coins, enough to reach the next settlement. Emma watched the Apache riders disappear into the heat shimmer, taking her childhood's last illusions with them. She was alone again, but this time by choice. She began walking north toward towns she had never seen and a future she would have to build with her own hands. Behind her, three tiny figures grew smaller and smaller until the desert swallowed them completely. Emma walked for 3 days through country that would have killed her a week ago. But the desert had taught her its lessons well. She found water in hidden springs, shelter in the shade of canyon walls, food in the seeds of desert plants Maria had shown her. Her injured shoulder still ached, but the pain had become familiar, like an old friend who reminded her of how far she had traveled. On the 4th day, she crested a ridge and saw smoke rising in the distance. Not the black smoke of a wildfire, but the gray smoke of cooking fires and forged bellows. A settlement. The town of Esperanza was small but bustling, built around a natural spring that made it a vital stop for travelers crossing the desert. Emma walked down the main street with her head high, ignoring the curious stares her dust-covered appearance attracted. At the general store, she traded one of Maria's silver coins for supplies, a canteen, a bedroll dried food, and a small knife for protection. The shopkeeper, a kind-faced woman named Mrs. Chen, asked no questions about where Emma had come from or where she was going. "You traveling alone, child?" she asked instead. "Yes, ma'am, but I'm not lost." Mrs. Chen studied Emma's face, seeing something there that made her nod with approval. "No, I don't expect you are. You got the look of someone who knows exactly where they're headed." Emma bought paper and ink as well. She had letters to write. The first went to the territorial governor describing Captain Harrison's crimes and the location where she had last seen him. Even if he survived the desert, he would face justice when he returned to civilization. The second went to the Bureau of Indian Affairs, requesting an investigation into the sale of Apache captives and the corruption of Army officers at Fort Stevens. The third went to her aunt in California, her father's sister, who had written faithfully for years despite never receiving replies. Emma told her the truth about what had happened, about her mother's betrayal and her own survival. She asked for nothing but offered everything a niece who had learned to stand on her own feet. She posted the letters with the coins Maria had given her, then sat on the porch of the hotel to wait for the next westbound stage. That evening, as the sun painted the desert gold and red, a familiar figure limped into town. Her mother. Sarah Crawford looked like she had aged 10 years in 4 days. Her dress was torn and filthy, her face burned by the sun, her lips cracked and bleeding. She moved with the careful steps of someone whose feet were raw with blisters. But she was alive. Emma watched from the shadows as Sarah begged for water at the saloon, as she tried to trade her wedding ring for food, as she finally collapsed on the steps of the church and wept with exhaustion. For a moment, Emma felt the old pull of duty and love, the desire to run to her mother, to comfort her, to forgive everything, and pretend they could go back to the way things were. But Emma had learned hard truths in the desert. Some bridges once burned could not be rebuilt. Some betrayals cut too deep for easy healing. Instead, she waited until Sarah had been taken in by the church ladies and given food and shelter. Then Emma approached the preacher's wife. "The woman who just came in," she said quietly. "Her name is Sarah Crawford. She's my mother." The woman's eyes widened. "Child, where have you been? She's been telling everyone her daughter died in a wagon accident." "In a way, I did die," Emma replied, "but I got better." She pressed a silver coin into the woman's palm. "This will pay for her food and lodging until she's strong enough to work. After that, she's on her own. But surely you want to see her, to speak with her." Emma looked through the window at her mother, who was sitting by the fire with a bowl of soup, telling her story to anyone who would listen. Even now, even after everything Sarah was performing, seeking sympathy and aid through manipulation rather than honesty. "No," Emma said softly, "I've seen enough." The next morning, she boarded the westbound stage without looking back. California welcomed her with orange groves and ocean breezes. Her Aunt Martha proved to be everything her letters had suggested: practical, kind, and wise enough to let Emma tell her story in her own time. Emma enrolled in school where her desert-learned resilience served her well. She studied hard, spoke little, and earned a reputation for quiet competence that opened doors others couldn't pass through. Years later, when she had become a teacher herself, Emma would tell her students about the desert and what it had taught her, about the difference between surviving and living, about the courage required to walk away from poison love. About the day, she learned that family was not something you were born into, but something you chose to build with people worthy of your trust. She never saw her mother again, though she heard stories sometimes from travelers passing through. Sarah had married a merchant in Arizona, a kind man who took care of her in her declining years. Perhaps she had learned something from the desert after all. Emma hoped so, but she had stopped needing to know. On warm evenings when the California sunset reminded her of that other sky above a harsher land, Emma would touch the small pouch at her throat. Inside was a piece of red stone from the desert where she had been reborn, a gift from Maria, who had written once to say that Naalnish had used the locket's gold to buy safe passage for 12 Apache children to a reservation where they would be fed and educated rather than hunted. All children should be protected, Emma had said, even when it meant protecting them from their own mothers. The desert had taught her that some things once broken could not be mended. But it had also taught her that what grew in such harsh soil was often stronger than anything that flourished in gentler ground. Emma had grown strong indeed. She had touched the face of betrayal and survived. She had walked through the valley of abandonment and emerged whole. She had learned to choose her own family, her own path, her own truth. The little girl who had jumped from a falling wagon was gone forever. But the woman who had taken her place was worth the terrible price of that transformation. And sometimes in dreams, she still heard the desert wind calling her name, with Maria's voice reminding her that she would always be welcome in that hard, honest country where only truth survived the burning sun.